Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monica Corda. I'm the Director of Business Development at the Tech Collective, and we're so pleased to have you all here today. It's a pretty full house, which is always a great thing to have. For those of you who may be unfamiliar, Tech Collective is the IT Industry Association for the state of Rhode Island. So what that means is we offer training for you, as well as informational sessions such as today, and ways to get together with other people who serve in IT, such as our Agile Rhode Island group and open source. So today we are very pleased to have Natalie Benkovich here with us from AIPSO. She has been very involved with our Women in Tech program through the years as a mentor and just being involved putting programming together. And then little did we know, she is also a project manager, and she was willing to share with us her expertise in this field. So for those of you who didn't hear, she said she is a self-proclaimed fast talker. So get your pencils ready to go. She has a lot of slides, so be ready. What we're asking is if you have questions during the presentation, just please put them into the chat, and I'll MC them and interrupt Natalie as she presents, and we'll get those questions answered for you. So with that, I hand over complete control. Enjoy the ride, Natalie. Thank you again.
Okay, great. So I want to start off by saying when we first started talking about doing these sessions for the Tech Collective, the presentation that I'm about to show you is actually like a full semester's worth of work that another one of the committee members says that this is what he covers for a whole semester at Bristol Community College. And then I said, well, how much time do I get? And they said, about 45 minutes. And I said, okay, well, I'm a fast talker, but I'm not that fast. So what I want to do today is I'm going to actually run through each one really quickly, but some I think are really, and the slides will be made available later if people want them, so don't feel like you have to rush to take notes. But I wanted to stop and talk a little bit about my experiences in some of the areas that you might not be as familiar with. And then kind of fly through some of the other areas I think can be considered more typical of, that are usually have standards at your own organizations. So I want to kind of make sure I'm focusing on the stuff that is probably a little more interesting to folks. So with that in mind, what are we going to do today? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, like 2 seconds worth, and then talk a little bit about what is this PM thing that everyone's talking about, and then dive right into the overview of the knowledge areas. So hopefully some folks have already done some stuff around project management. And again, I'm going to go through some stuff really quickly, but I'm happy to stop at times and take questions. And I might also be asking you at times to respond via the chat, because I want to make sure that people are still interacting and understanding what I'm talking about, so I'm not getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so who am I? I've worked at AIPSO now for, it feels like a billion years. It's only really been 24. I started there as a developer, and I did that for 13 years before I went on to start working as a business analyst and then later as a project manager. So I bring some software development expertise, but my focus now is completely on project management. So, okay. So what is a framework? So the PMI methodology that a lot of people talk about is really basically a framework. So it's just a body of knowledge that provides you with all kinds of tools on how to do a project. And the reason why you would use one is a lot of times you want to standardize your practices in your organization. So the Project Management Institute's methodology isn't the only one out there, actually. I mean, it's a very popular one. I know it's one that gets a lot of buzz, but there are others out there that are less well known. So I know for our organization, they wanted to use a methodology so we were all speaking a common language and using a lot of the same processes for how we were accomplishing project work. So the one thing about the framework I will say is it has 5 processes, it has 10 knowledge areas, but you don't do them all boom, 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 one at a time. There's a lot of interconnectedness. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more. So just in a nutshell, so this project management methodology is just a way of organizing how we get projects done. It's not, there's nothing magical about it, but Monica looks confused. Okay, I'm moving on. Okay, so the processes. So this is basic. If you just think about, let's first start with what I mean by a project. So a project has a start and an end, and it's not an operational thing. So if I was to look at, say, my company makes widgets. So a project might be to set up a new machine that makes a new kind of widget. Once that machine is operational and people are using it every day, that's no longer a project. That's called operations. So if you look at it from that perspective, we've all done tons of projects in our life that we probably didn't even think of as a project. I don't know, painting a room in your house, going on a vacation, hosting a barbecue. I mean, these are everyday examples of things that you do that have a beginning and an end and are not operational. So when we look at it from that perspective, what I'd like folks to do is to just in their mind, for the purpose of the rest of the presentation, to think of a recent thing they've done that would be considered a project. So it could be work related, it could be personal. I mean, I at one point had planned this fabulous vacation. Obviously that didn't happen. We're going to talk more about risk later, but like that's, I use that sometimes as a really great example of how you go about making that happen, right? And the steps involved with that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to just dive right into the knowledge areas. Okay, have I lost anyone? I think everyone's still with me. Okay. So these are the 10 knowledge areas. I'm going to speak to the things that I think are kind of unique about the methodology. I think things like procurement management, which has to do with contracts and procuring resources, those tend to be really dependent on how your business or your organization has processes and procedures in place. So I think instead, I'd like to kind of focus on some of the things that might be new terms for people when using the project management methodology. So why don't we just dive right in, if that sounds okay. So does everyone have a project in mind? Yes? Okay.
They don't want to yell at once, so
I'll
say
if they want to put it in the chat, they can. I mean, my
yes,
project is
getting some yeses now.
Plan a trip to
There we
Europe.
go.
Okay, great. Okay. So first off is integration management. So I want to talk specifically in this area about the project charter. So you may have heard this term. Basically, it is what you are initiating. This is like the initiating of the project where you're kind of spelling out, what does my business need? What is my objectives? What is this supposed to be delivering? You might have some initial thoughts on scope or even the estimate of the effort. But the purpose of it is to explain what's our business need, what are we trying to accomplish, and now you want to get sign off or approval from whoever it is in your organization that does that. In the PMI methodology, a lot of times they talk about using a steering committee, which is just basically a group of managers that have the right to say yes or no to your project. So in your organization, it could look a lot of different ways. If you're in a small organization, it could be the owner, you know, so but the whole point of that is really just to make sure that everyone's on board with what you're trying to accomplish. And it also is a great time for whoever that person is or that governing body, board or party is to say that we're not really thinking this is a good idea. We're not up for this. We don't want to spend the money right now. Some of the projects that like we were kind of talking about, maybe people moving, so like planning a trip or going moving, those projects, maybe you're the person who is really going to have to be the approver and to move things forward. So, but in most organizations, there's a group of people that kind of help make that decision. So the other piece is the project management plan. Now, there are so many pieces to the project management plan. We're going to cover them in the other areas, but basically this encompasses all the documents that you're using to manage your project. And we're going to talk about them. What's your plan for communicating? What's your plan for handling risks? What's your plan for quality? What is your schedule like? These are all documents that end up becoming part of this larger thing called a project management plan. So, and then monitoring and controlling the project. Now, this can also depend on methodologies that you use in your organization. It could be independent, depending on whoever it is who's leading the project, but it's really how are you going to actually be kind of tracking what's going on. A lot of times I find it helpful to kind of make my plan, figure out how I'm going to be checking in with everyone. Sometimes it's meetings, sometimes it's emails, sometimes I'm sending out spreadsheets. Maybe I have a SharePoint site and I'm sending out messaging. So it should be appropriate to the people that want to know what's going on, and also so that you can feel like you know what's going on. So obviously that can be very unique per project and per project manager. Okay. Scope. Hopefully everyone has heard of scope. Scope can be your friend or not your friend, depending on how you manage it. So I like to define scope is what is in and what is out. And what is out, I think sometimes is as important as defining what is not in, because the most important thing you're doing here with scope is setting expectations. You want people to all be on board with what they're going to get. I used to use this example of, someone orders a mini fridge and they get it and they're like, but how come the light doesn't turn on when I open the door? I don't know. Did you ask for a light to come on? I don't see that in the spec here. Okay, well, we had a problem with scope. It wasn't clear. I can't tell you how many times I've worked on several projects where the users start to use it and they say, but I thought it was going to do this. And then I'll say, okay, but we never talked about it doing that. So that's where scope can be really important. And it also should be used later on. You'll get into when we start talking about schedule, how you handle your scope and your requirements can also be really important when it comes time to, if you have problems with deadline or cost, and you have to start saying, oh, maybe we're going to have to look at cutting scope. So I'm sure people have heard of that phrase before too. So scope is very important. The other thing is, how are you going to manage scope? So who's in charge of saying it's okay if something goes in or goes out? You want to define that up front, because you can have issues with people getting really bent out of shape if like everyone feels like they can just go ahead and add stuff in, right? And next thing you know, the project blows up and so does the timeline. So it's really good up front. I make it a practice to say, okay, who is it that would have to sign off if we wanted to change an item that's in scope or out of scope for the project? Okay. Schedule management. So WBS is near and dear to my heart. I know Kristen Hogan's on the call as well, and we use this process that I'm so excited I wanted to share with you guys. So, so this is kind of like the bread and butter of figuring out how long and what's involved with something. So I've laid out my deliverables right in my charter. I said, okay, these are the 3 things that we're thinking this project's going to have, and I've talked about the scope, and this is what it's going to look like. And now I need to figure out, okay, well, but how long is that going to take, and who's going to do it? And just as important, what particular order do things have to happen in? So to effectively manage the project from start to finish, you really have to have a good idea of what all of those pieces look like. And then that feeds into schedule. And hopefully when you're all done, you have a schedule that everyone is going to buy into. Hopefully you're not going to all of a sudden find out, oh my gosh, if we do everything on the list according to what people are saying, we're going to be a whole year late. And then that's a totally different conversation we're not going to talk about right now. But so I thought I would share with you what I've done in the past for my teams with work breakdown schedule. So the important thing is you start with your deliverables. I'm going to bring it up to the next one. So here's just a sample of how we've done it in the past. So the way that I have typically done this to make this easier for everyone in the room is we have the deliverables. I usually put them up on huge sheets of paper throughout the room. And then we actually use sticky notes. And the reason why I say we use large sticky notes is because the first thing is we start to break down each deliverable into small enough chunks that we can assign it to a person and we can say how long we think it's going to take. Now that's important, but even more important, after we've identified all those things, we need to get some kind of order in terms of do we have to go ahead and have things happen in a certain order of things? If you were to look at what I have here for deliverable 1, for instance, so I have on the left my high level functionality, define that, and then I have the three steps in a row need to go in a row. In this example, I have them sequenced. Also part of this deliverable is something else that can happen at any time while the other things are happening. So what this really means is I'm already setting up some understanding sequencing or dependencies, which is what I typically call them as dependencies. And I'm already starting to figure out how long we think it's going to take for all these different pieces. Now, this example I'm using is one we did that was more of a waterfall, like for a website we did this for, and I've done it for some other things. Agile has different processes that they've used to develop schedule, but I'm not going to have time to go into those as well. So I'm just going to use this example for today. So, okay. So I'm going through all of this. Here's all my deliverables, and then later I stick it into MS Project. So Microsoft Project is very popular, but it's not the end all be all. You could use an Excel spreadsheet. You could use a Word document. You could use a JIRA system. You could use all kinds of different things depending on what your organization has available. I like Project just because it allows me to set precedents, meaning, like for instance, in the example I have highlighted like task 21. There's a bunch of things that if you look at the precedents column have to happen, like have to wait for that number 21 to be done before they can go ahead. And so by having the precedent set and knowing the sequencing of events, is really what that's doing for me. It allows me to realistically get a better timeline or a sense for when we're going to get things done. The other thing it does for me too is if one thing slides and I want to see the impact on the schedule, I can update it in here and it's going to go ahead and move it out for me. So, but this is just an example of one that I've done in the past. And again, whatever system is available to your organization, this is just one that I've used. Okay, so has anyone here used other things besides Project for their managing project schedules and stuff? If you want to throw it into the chat, I'd be interested to know if you have experience with other things. ConnectWise, I'm not familiar with that one. Interesting. PPM and Clips, Google Sheets. Very cool. I'm not even familiar with half those. That's amazing. Very cool. Cool. And DevOps. Yes, we use DevOps now in my organization too. And I like that tool. So they're getting much better, especially making it easier to license for multiple users. So like one of the issues I was having with Microsoft Project is I loved it, but I didn't have a license available for every one of my team members. So that meant I became the one who had to do most of the updating. But now some of these other tools are easier to give access to or cheaper anyway per person license. So, okay, I'm going to fly through cost management because I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with budget and controlling project costs. I think a lot of it depends on what it is you have to do costs on. When I was doing my schedule, I've also seen where people have taken that WBS and even attached, use the hours to determine cost, especially if the bulk of the project is really about activities that are done by, say, consultants or say they're IT people, and we know that the hour rate for them, you can use that for cost. And we're going to talk a little bit briefly later at the end about contracts. So when you have things where you're procuring actual pieces of equipment, that all goes into it. So this is where I was talking about that kind of all feed into each other, because sometimes I know, like for in my organization, a lot of times they want an estimate in terms of cost and time to deliver. And sometimes that's really hard to know until you get into more of these detailed pieces, like doing a WBS or some kind of other breakdown. So anyway, just something to keep in mind. So how am I doing for time? Doing great. Okay. Quality. So as in terms of how project management views quality, it's really about customer expectation. So when they talk about something being quality, it means that it meets the expectation of the customer. And I just want to say a note on this because there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So with quality, that doesn't mean feature rich does not make it better quality, right? If I expect to own a vehicle that's going to get me to and from work every day, and I buy this beautiful Mercedes that keeps breaking down, I would probably say it's not great quality. Now, if my expectation was just, I want to have a shiny new Mercedes, well, then I guess it was okay quality. But again, I might argue that that's not really the case. So if my expectation is I want a car that's going to get me back and forth to work, and I buy a small Japanese sedan and it runs for 200,000 miles, I would probably say that's pretty good quality because my expectation was that it was going to get me to and from. Yeah. Now, one of the other things that come into play is when we talk about quality assurance versus quality control. So typically quality control is all the testing that seems to happen at the end, right? So I think most people are familiar with, oh, we've done all of our coding, we're going to send it over to the QC department for testing. And by then, who knows how big a certain bug or defect might be. The whole idea behind quality assurance is that you're proactively looking for things going on to help ensure that at the very end, you're going to have quality. So that could be, if I was going to say, say you worked in a company that produced automobiles, let's just say, right? And you have certain specs, you're probably during different parts of the process, you're probably validating, does it meet specifications? You're measuring things, you're weighing things, you're trying to figure out, does it actually meet what you're expecting long before you're trying to take that car for a test drive? Because that would be really way too late in the process to realize that something was really wrong. I will say I've had challenges. I don't know if anyone wants to share if they've had good experience trying to build in more of that quality assurance piece in software development. I've seen some where we've done some regression testing that's automated. That's been really helpful. But especially when you're doing new functionality, say of a website, it's kind of a harder thing to build in, except for to continuously making sure that you understand the requirements of the client. Anyone? Anyone?
We have some typing going on.
Code review and unit testing. Yes, Denise. Yes. Thank you. So, and I have seen that done just about every project I've seen. What I haven't seen done though is checking with the client. Is it meeting the requirement until much further down the road? So, yeah, just something to to early demos. Right idea, Denise. Yes, early demos. And I think that anything we can do to try and make sure that the customer is understanding what they're getting over and over and over again, right? Customer expectation is going to lead to customer satisfaction. So managing those expectations along the way. Okay, moving on. So resource management, I'm going to just spend very quick amount of time on this. So we talked a little bit about estimating activity resources, but I think the important thing that I wanted to just talk about a little bit was building a team, and then what's a SME? So maybe people have heard of this, the SME thing, SME. Any guesses on what it means? You can put it in the chat if you haven't guessed.
There is a guest coming in.
Okay.
Subject matter expert.
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh, it was too easy.
Oh,
yes.
A lot of people getting that one.
That's awesome. Okay. Thank you. So I really think it's important when you're talking about building a team that you look at first all the key areas that you'd want to have represented, but also keep in mind that you want a team that's going to complement each other. So someone who knows more than me. Exactly, Denise. That is a subject matter expert. So I think one of the things, like for instance, I really appreciated having this one BA on my team this past year because she usually tended to take a different perspective or approach to problem solving and would probably see things sometimes that I didn't. And so I intentionally was really glad to have her there. It could be someone who's had experience if you're replacing a system with the older system, someone who's going to be impacted by whatever that new system's going to bring. But it's really important to try and get a really good diverse group of people that know, not one person is going to know everything about what you're going to do. So here's just an example of one that I did. I kind of doctored up the names to save the innocent, but basically we have what we call a project sponsor. So that's usually defined in your charter. So it's kind of usually an executive or a business lead that is going to be kind of that higher level oversight person you go to with larger scope issues. They could help you with budgeting or estimating, and they usually higher level oversight of the project. A project manager. Now, depending on the organization, the size of the project, you might have business analysts. You could have multiple. You could have the project manager and the analyst be the same person. I mean, this is just an example of how I did it, but it can vary based on organization and then what you're looking to accomplish. Okay, so that's the team. So one thing I've noticed as being part of a team, project manager, is sometimes it's really more about just trying to even deal with the personalities in the room. Has anyone else had issues with personalities on a team? Maybe, no, I guess I'm the only one. So, so sometimes that really is like one of the things that you really have to work on the most, right? And so one of the things that I didn't learn in my PM training that I had to learn the hard way was how to get people of differing opinions and styles to work collaboratively. And that is not an always easy task. And there's probably courses and books and all kinds of things out there on how to do that. We don't have time to cover that. But rest assured, that is an issue that a lot of teams run into. Okay, so stakeholder. So this is another PM term. I hadn't heard of it before. The PM methodology used in quite the same way that it does, but it's anyone who's going to be impacted either positively or negatively by the results of your project. So this could be really anyone, right? So for instance, you're putting up a website. It could be the users. It could be the IT folks that have to do the support. It could be the people who answer the phones when nothing is working right. It could be the business unit that's supplying the information or the content for the website. If you deal with regulators, it could be them. So it's really important to try and identify as many as possible. And so what I've done in the past with groups is we just do some brainstorming, right? Who are the stakeholders? And the other thing that was really helpful that I usually do with my teams is I say, like, why do they care? I don't know. So for instance, like we're developing a new feature on our site and we want to let our agents know. Well, why do they care? Well, maybe they care because they're going to get calls from people going, what the heck is this? How do I use it? I don't know what to do here, right? So it's just a good idea to try and upfront keep the stakeholders in mind. And we'll be talking about how that kind of plays into communications in just a moment. Okay, so here's an example of a stakeholder analysis that I did years ago for a project that we just wrapping up, actually. But one of the things that I have found really helpful is to let the team just kind of like just come up with as many things as they can think of, and to not try and curb any ideas and just make people feel comfortable sharing them. And then we go back over and we try and figure out, okay, like, do we really need to consider what this person needs? Why do they care? And sometimes that kind of will slim down the list a little bit, but you're not looking to try and get your list as small as possible. You want it to be as effective as possible, right? So maybe that means you have 100 people on your list. I hope you don't, but one of the other things that we have done that's been really helpful too is we have a template that has some of our more common stakeholders. A lot of time businesses or projects will have the same stakeholders as they've had in the past. So we go back to that example of you're thinking about your project, right? So I'm going on to Europe. Who are the stakeholders that I need to worry about? Sometimes it's hard. You really have to think about who's going to be affected one way or another. I don't know, maybe I need to tell some people at work I'm not going to be around. That would probably be a good thing to do. Maybe I need to contact the post office and hold my mail. Those are just some examples. Someone else had posted moving. I don't know. So maybe some of your stakeholders could be the moving company and your new neighbors, and you need to contact the utilities, right? So if you just think about who's going to be affected by what we're trying to do here, it's the easiest way to come up with a great stakeholder analysis list. Okay, which leads us to communications. Okay, so it's interesting times we live in, right? Because up until 5 months ago, I spent a lot of time in meetings, in-person meetings, and then, so I don't know if anyone else had felt this too, and then all of a sudden it felt like a really quick, abrupt shift. And as teams, we had to figure out how are we going to communicate. Not everyone was getting on Teams right away. Not everyone had a video. Not everyone had a microphone. So we were doing a lot more email. And then I was finding, hey, but certain people don't respond to my email. That was kind of irritating. Why aren't they responding? Well, you have to consider, again, how do your people want to be communicated with? So this can vary by stakeholder. So building off what we just talked about with stakeholders, I like to start with that, and then we talk about what do we need to tell them about? What communications do I need to give these people? So in the example I have here, we were doing a whole system replacement, and so we tried to think about all the things that we'd want to be doing, and we actually included things like, we're going to have to train them, but also like, we want to show them the new features and get feedback. So how are we going to do that? Okay, we can do that in a training room class. Oh, we need to give them status of where we are. Well, we could do that in meetings. We also thought, well, but they'd also kind of want to know, like, what's new and different? Like, how can we get them excited about this? Oh, well, we'll do some posters and we'll have some visual things up in their department so they can know what's happening. So again, what I've done in the past is I take the stakeholders and I figure out what they care about and then figure out how we're going to communicate them. So this is just another example of now these are items that I take these items and I actually add them to my project plan so that all of the to-do items that I'm tracking or have to make sure get done are all in one place. So that's why I was saying that, like, that project plan, it includes a lot of stuff, right? And we're not done yet. There's more. Okay, risk management. So I just wanted to go over a little bit about how we typically handle this. And you probably do risk management now and you don't even realize it because you don't call it by the same terms I'm using. But so a risk in terms of the project management methodology, right, is anything that could negatively or positively impact the project. I have to be honest, I have never once seen someone want to discuss all the positive things that could impact a project. Usually it's the negative things that could impact a project. I was thinking about this today. I was getting ready for this presentation. I'm thinking, I wonder if any project manager put on their list of possible risks, pandemic arriving March of 2020. But that just goes to show that even you can try and plan as much as you can, and you're still going to end up with some things that just go wrong. So what I've typically done to do this is I usually do another brainstorming thing, just like let people just, come up with all kinds of things that could possibly happen. And then I have actually been in rooms where we've come up with like 80 or 90 risks. Usually I can group them together a little bit, and then we need to have an honest conversation about impact and likelihood. So you can't plan for every possible thing that could happen. If I have 90 risks in my risk register, there's no way I could really realistically come up with 90 risk plans and implement them. What you want to focus on, the things that are going to be likely to happen and the things that are going to have a medium to high impact. It's usually how I judge it. One of the examples that I was thinking of today, actually was making me laugh, is I was in the project team meeting and one person listed as the risk that the project manager would suddenly leave or become hurt and unable to work. And I was like, wait, I'm the project manager. Like, that didn't feel good. But then I thought, no, this is really smart, because what they're saying is, right, there's knowledge that I have that would be impactful to get lost. If I had to make sure that I did actually do a risk response to that. Okay, so my response was the real risk was not so much that something would happen to me, right? But that key members of the team, for some reason unknown to us, would suddenly become unavailable. And so we had to figure out how were we going to deal with that. And so it was a valid risk. So I'm going to show you an example of how I've done this in the past. So if you think about the risk that the project I asked you to think about in the beginning, what are some risks that you think would actually be impactful or likelihood? Can you just throw them in then the likelihood would be medium or high. Can you just throw them in the chat? Like, for instance, mine is I'm going to Europe. So I don't know, a risk could be that my flight gets canceled, or the hotel I'm staying at suddenly, I don't know, it breaks, or I don't know, like something happens to it and I can't go there, or the person I'm traveling with can't go. Those might be some things that I might want to think about. How am I going to deal with them, right? Weather, great, another great one. Budget cuts. Oh, look at all these great reasons. Oh, thank you guys. Great risks. Thank you. So again, though, you have to figure out then, okay, so what are we going to do about them, right? So the project management methodology has 4 categories for how we respond to a risk. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how I've done that in the past. So one is avoid the risk. So a lot of times, really, that means maybe you're cutting scope, or you're eliminating an item that you feel like you just don't want to take a chance on, and you don't have a good way to do anything to prevent. Transfer the risk. So the best example I have of this is insurance, right? If one of my risks is my friend can't go, and I don't want to go by myself, then I'm going to get insurance so that something happens, I can get my money back and we can reschedule for another time, right? That's insurance is the best example I can think of that one. Mitigate. So mitigate is really about what can I do now to either decrease the likelihood or the impact of that thing happening. And usually mitigation is the bulk of what we're doing when we're doing risk planning, is talking about how we're going to mitigate something that could come up. And I'll show you some examples. And then the last one is accept. So, and sometimes there are things that you have to accept, and you don't have options. You can't cut them from scope, and there's nothing you can do to prevent them. So you might say, I'm going to accept them, but I'm going to put something else in place just in case, or we're just going to hope that that never happens. I know it sounds scary to think that that's the response, but sometimes that is the response. Okay, so let me show you. Here is our part of a risk plan that I did with the team. So you can see we listed the risks, and then we did probability and impact, and then how we were going to respond to them. So I think this first one, I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this, but having limited availability to for project resources. So we're worried about people getting dragged away for other priorities. And we decided that that was really going to be, it could be very problematic to our schedule and what we were trying to accomplish. But we decided that really the best way we could do that is just to be constantly checking in and to make sure people were aware of what our deadlines were and what the expectations were. Now, the second one, I have to laugh because it just reminds me of the pandemic. So this risk was natural, where it includes loss of work time due to weather, impending winter, the chance for inclement weather is high. I just remember at the time we're like, oh, we need to make a plan for snow. And then we said, well, we really couldn't. I mean, I think the pandemic is the same thing. If someone had brought up the chance of us having a pandemic, probably someone would say, well, the chance of that is so low and we can't prevent that. So we would just have to accept it. But I have seen on plans, like, for instance, what if the facility suddenly wasn't available? Something happened to the facility. So now that you kind of know what a risk plan looks like, have you been involved in any risk planning in your organizations? And if you have, what kind of risk plan were they? Can you just kind of answer in the chat so we get a sense of what those were? I just got a yes, but I know it's like kind of a risk plan on steroids. We've got a group that does disaster recovery and business continuity planning, and that's really almost like making a risk plan just for your operations. So it's really all about just understanding what could possibly go wrong and seeing if you can do anything about it before it happens, right? Which is what you're hoping for. Okay. Procurement is the last one. So I don't want to spend much time talking about this because this is really about contracts, getting materials. It's been my experience, a lot of this is dictated by the policies and procedures that are in your organizations. And I'm sure that a lot of your organizations do have, set policies and procedures that they do have to follow. But again, just like I would do with the risk register items or anything that comes out of my planning for procurement, I add them all into my project plan and my schedule so that I know how they could possibly impact where I'm looking to go and what I'm trying to accomplish. Okay. Oh my gosh, we got through all 10 of them in 44 minutes. Okay. So project management model, we talked about that. It's a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules for planning a project. And the knowledge areas are basically just a template for doing that. So I find that it's very helpful to know that I have templates to work with and I don't feel like I'm starting from scratch. And I have a methodology that members of the organization are familiar with that helps us to be more effective in the use of our projects. And I didn't touch on it as much as I wanted to, but the use of the different areas can vary based on the type of project and the culture of the organization. So I find things like procurement, for instance, in our organization, we have very strict procedures about how that works. And that's really more of what we follow than any kind of template from the methodology for procurement, but maybe it's different in your organization. So that really, it depends on the size of project and what your company really likes to do. Okay, so I got through it all. A couple of resources for you. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar that the Ocean State does have its own PMI group that puts on workshops monthly during I call it the school year, September to June. They tend to have monthly sessions. For folks that aren't familiar with the PMI, they have a designation. You can take some coursework and an exam and apply and become a PMP, a designated project management professional. And when you do that, you're expected to get so many PDUs or basically credits related to project management within a certain time frame. So things like the Ocean State PMI put on workshops and things that can count toward those PDUs. And then the Project Management Institute, which is kind of, houses all of the methodology, and they do a lot of workshops and programs as well. Okay, that's all I had. So who has questions for me? Because I got through it all in the time allotted.
Do you need to be a PMP to attend PMI?
You do not need to be a PMP to attend any of the PMI events or Ocean State PMI. Anyone can attend. You can actually become a member too, even of like the Ocean State PMI. They usually have discounts for members. So, and you don't have to be a PMP to become a member either.
Also, while folks are thinking of what their questions might be, I posted one question in the chat. It's just a survey. It's a one-question survey. If people would just take a moment just to complete it and let us know if we hit the mark with today's presentation. I think Natalie did an awesome job, so we're grateful for that. I saw like Tyler's hand go up and then go down. Tyler, did you have a question?
No, I was trying to get to the chat so I could see the thing and I hit the wrong button
several
times. Sorry.
Come on,
I can make one up, but I think we covered everything great.
Okay. I haven't heard the question yet, but I will. Some people have asked me what's involved with becoming PMP certified. And so you have to fill out an application. Thankfully now is now online that tallies up. You have to show you've had a certain amount of hours in experience in doing any kind of project management work. Now, it doesn't mean you're running projects necessarily, even that could just be involvement. You could be doing analysis. You could be helping with all the different areas of a project. And then you have to take a certain number of hours of coursework. A lot of times people will just take like a PMP, they call them a boot camp, but it amounts to, I believe, like 1 solid week's worth of content, or you can take it, you know, a lot of places offer it at night or online. Then thank you, Patty. I just saw your comment. And then you sit for the exam. So exam takes about 4 hours, but you find out at the end of the exam how you did, and then that's it. They send it to you in the mail, and then you just have to get recertified every 3 years. So.
Yeah, lots of really positive comments back saying you did a great job doing the presentation. And I guess I'm thinking this is Greg Spaziano wrote, he's thinking of doing it online. Interested in doing it online. So.
And I know, Monica, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I know we're discussing, right, offering some more of that.
Some classwork that would come under that time. So maybe the certified associate project manager. So we've had really great response to this series of classes, of informational classes, and really wanted to find out, was there an interest? And certainly from the registration and from attendance, we feel that there is. So please be watching your What's on Deck at Tech Collective on Fridays. For those of you who don't receive it, now that you've attended this event, you will be getting that information. And our website is always a great place to be looking for what's up and coming. So I could tell you kind of things going on, coming up, not in project management, but just in case you're interested, is Ethical Hacker. It starts September 15th. That is for members of the Tech Collective. It's a $1,500 fee. It's a 40-hour coursework, and that's a great thing to do, and something that will definitely, if you have that cert, it definitely bumps your salary a little bit as well, or at least it's a good point to use. We will have customer service starting in October, early October. That's a 16-hour training. And then later in October, we'll be offering certified Scrum Master. So a lot of really great certification classes that you'll be able to get with Tech Collective. And if you're not a member, you can feel free to reach out to me. Happy to answer whatever those questions might be. I see more coming in.
So Morgan, in response to your question, as far as I know, you do not have to have a college degree to get PMP. I don't know, Denise or Kristen, if you know, I don't believe that's anywhere on the application. What they really just require is that you have a certain number of hours and experience related to project work.
Their hours are actually different based on whether you have a degree or not. So just look at pmi.org for the certification qualifications.
I'm in the process, and if you don't have a bachelor's, it's 5 years of project management, documented hours.
Mm-hmm.
Without your bachelor's.
And I think it drops if you do.
Yep, I think it's like 3 years if you have your bachelor's.
Okay.
And as Natalie said, that's in anything that has to do from project. You can be a team member, not just as a project manager.
Correct.
So I do have a question on that. I think part of the challenge is, you know, if you're not a project manager and you don't have a PMP, I think that's where it is. You know, so you want to be a project manager. Well, you don't have a PMP, so it's kind of like you're chasing your tail. You know, and so I'll let you speak to that, but that's kind of frustrating.
You know, I think getting this certification is a great way to get started. They also have levels of certification. So they have the, it's a, Monica, help me, I'm trying to think of.
Associate project.
Associate, right, which has less time that you have to spend taking coursework and showing that you've done some work. I think you're going to have to just kind of take a new look at what your experience has been. My guess is you've done a lot of project-related work that you're not even considering project-related work.
Yeah, it's true.
That would count. So I think sometimes it's just if you were to go to the PMI and to look at what you can count as hours, that would probably be a great exercise. You would probably be pleasantly surprised at how many of the activities you've done in your past would qualify.
Okay.
Because I had
So
never
how many-
managed a project before I started the process of getting my PMP.
Yeah. So how many hours do you have? Do you need to have, you said the equivalent of 3 years, so that's 3 years of project,
Yeah, I'm trying to think. When I did it, I thought it was like 5,000 hours. So, or
which is still
2,000. I mean,
significant.
it was what I thought to be a ridiculous number of hours.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you think about, okay, I worked on this thing for 6 months. I probably spent half my workday on it. These are the kind of activities. You'd be amazed at how quickly that can really add up.
Yeah, I was actually running projects full time for nearly 5 years before I went for my certification. And it does very quickly add up. And if you're looking to get into project management, just look at your soft skills, facilitation, negotiation,
Yeah, definitely.
communication, organization, and build on those skills as well as looking for those certifications, because those are the skills that you really use as a project manager.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Natalie, Eric had asked, is there a website or resource that shows the different levels, associate, et cetera, of PMP and the qualifications to get to each?
Yes, I would go to pmi.org. And I'll just type it in. And they have a actual, at the very top, I think it even lists it right there. It just has a certifications listed, and it describes what they are.
So Natalie, for those of us that actually have our PMP right now and need to continue to remain certified and get enough credits every 3 years, can we submit for a PDU for this session?
I would go ahead and do that. Yeah.
Right.
I think
as like training and learning, okay.
Training and learning. Yeah, because I went over all of use the PMI terminology throughout. So yeah, I would definitely do it.
Okay.
Oh, which is a
This
good
should
reminder.
count
I
as
gotta make a note.
technical
yeah.
for 1 hour.
That's what I think, yes.
But actually that was a good reminder for me, because I actually can submit for PDUs for prepping and delivering content as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, some people get a little nervous because, you have to get 60 PDUs per 3-year cycle.
Yes.
But you can do it a lot of different ways. If you go to conferences where they have topics that are related to project management, you can get PDUs for that. There's online free webinars. There's different groups that offer training that is specific to trying to get PDUs. The PMI itself has a conference every year where you can get PDUs. This past year, they did the whole thing virtual. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it.
Well, monthly too, the Rhode Island, the Ocean State chapter of that also has an event every month. I believe they did. I think now it's a little bit less during COVID times, but they used to have one every month. And if you went, it was at least one, if not two, depending on how long the session was. So there's a lot of opportunities. And there's a lot of other sites that are that offer free PDUs, which is hard because a lot of the times the PDUs get expensive to get the training and the things that you need to do. So it's an expensive thing to keep up with. So you want to look for a lot of the free resources or the less expensive ones that you can get, because 60 of them can get pricey if you have to constantly go out and look for a class or something like that to earn them.
Projectmanagement.org, which is listed on Natalie's resources, does a lot of webinars for free PDUs.
Yep.
And Ocean State PMI has gone virtual.
Ah, good to know. Yeah, so they're doing a lot of stuff. There was is it projects seminars? I'm trying to think. There was another group that was offering a lot of content, but their stuff is usually not free. So and the PMI itself, actually PMI.org, they had a few free things in the beginning, but I think now that people are getting so used to the virtual formats, they're probably going to start charging for those things too, but they have some that are free. You can also like read, I think someone was saying you can read some articles too, but there's a limited number of that. They try and make sure you're not getting all your PDUs only one way, so you can, they kind of make you spread it out a little bit. You'll see when you go to look and see what you have to do. But
okay, Maria, if you can unmute, you asked how do you spell that, but I don't know what you needed spelled. I'm sorry, I wasn't quick enough to get the word that you needed. PDUs.
Oh, yeah, PDUs. So they're
Professional
oh my gosh.
development units, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll put it in.
Professional development units.
I think that's what it is.
I think you're right.
It's like your learning credits, but I think they call them professional development units. Yeah.
Yeah.
Super. Obviously, this is a great community, right? People are certainly willing to share their knowledge and their information. So if you think you're interested, you've gotten a lot of information today on the hows and the how-tos and where to look for other community, and certainly check back with us this fall. I have a feeling we'll be offering some cert level classes in this because obviously there's great interest. So Natalie, thank you again for your prep time.
For having me. This was
getting
great.
us through 26 slides in 42 minutes. So this presentation will be on Tech Collective's YouTube channel, probably about a week's time. It just needs to process and edit through. So give us a minute and it will be there. So if you want to refer back to any of the information or share the presentation with a colleague, it will be there for you. So thank you to everyone here. Thank you to Tyler Falcone from AIPSO for sharing Natalie with us for the day. We're very appreciative of her assistance. Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nat.
You too.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.